Marcus had always been a quiet student during his university years. While many of his classmates loved to show off their expensive gadgets, designer clothes, and luxurious cars, Marcus was different. He often came to class in simple shirts and worn shoes. He carried himself with humility, never trying to impress anyone. Most of his classmates assumed he was poor, struggling, or just not ambitious enough. What they didn't know was that Marcus was living a life full of responsibility. He was not only a student but also a single father raising his little daughter, Alana, on his own. Back in those days, people whispered about him. Some said it was a pity that he had a child so young. Others judged him silently, wondering how he would ever succeed while taking care of a baby. Marcus never wasted time explaining himself. He knew what his priorities were. He wanted to complete his education, provide a good life for his daughter, and prove to himself that his struggles had meaning. While other students spent nights partying, Marcus worked part-time jobs to pay for diapers, rent, and food. He was exhausted most days, but whenever he came home and saw Alana's smile, his energy returned. Years passed quickly. The classmates who once mocked him built their own careers, many of them supported by wealthy families. They liked to remind each other of their success stories, though most of them were living on inherited money. They drove shiny cars, took vacations abroad, and loved to post pictures of their glamorous lives online. In their eyes, Marcus had disappeared into an ordinary life, probably struggling as a single dad, just like they always predicted. None of them knew what he had really been building all those years. One afternoon, a group of those former classmates gathered at a cafe in the city. It was a casual reunion, filled with laughter, loud conversations, and prideful boasting. As they sipped their lattes and compared expensive watches, one of them brought up Marcus. "Hey, do you guys remember Marcus? That single dad who always wore those cheap shirts," a man named Brian said, smirking. "Oh yeah," another replied, laughing. "I remember. Poor guy was always rushing out of class. Probably had to go home and babysit. I bet he's still struggling." They all chuckled, enjoying the memory of how different he had been from them. None of them had kept in touch with him, but they assumed he hadn't gone far. To them, Marcus was someone beneath their level, someone to laugh about. Then, one of them came up with an idea. "Why don't we invite him to our dinner next week?" said Claire, one of the wealthiest in the group. "It'll be fun. Let's see how he's doing. I bet he'll show up in the same old clothes." They laughed at the suggestion, but quickly agreed. They loved the thought of comparing their shiny lives with his, expecting to mock him behind fake smiles. They planned a fancy dinner at one of the city's most luxurious restaurants, a place known for its high prices and exclusivity. To them, this wasn't just a reunion, it was entertainment. The invitation was sent to Marcus through an old alumni group chat. When Marcus saw the message, he paused for a moment. He hadn't spoken to any of them in years. Memories of their judgmental stares and whispered comments came rushing back. Part of him wanted to ignore the message, but another part of him felt calm curiosity. He wasn't the same man they once knew. He had built something they could never imagine. Still, Marcus wasn't the type to show off. After thinking it over, he decided to accept the invitation. The day of the dinner drew closer. The arrogant classmates grew excited, preparing their finest outfits and polishing their stories of success. They wanted to outshine one another, but most of all, they wanted to feel superior to Marcus. To them, he was the perfect target, a reminder of how great their own lives seemed. On the evening of the dinner, Marcus stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his simple yet neat shirt. He didn't wear designer clothes, nor did he feel the need to. He believed confidence came from within, not from a brand label. His daughter Alana, now a teenager, walked up to him with a smile. "Dad, you look great," she said softly. "Thanks, sweetheart," Marcus replied, smiling warmly. It's just dinner with some old classmates. Nothing special. Alana looked at him carefully, as though she could sense what he was really feeling. She knew her father's story better than anyone. She had seen him sacrifice sleep, work endless hours, and pour his heart into building a better life. To her, he was the most successful man in the world, even if no one else saw it. Remember, she said, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You already proved it to me. Marcus felt his chest tighten with pride. That was all the reminder he needed. He kissed his daughter's forehead, promised to be back soon, and headed out for the night. Meanwhile, at the luxurious restaurant, the classmates had already gathered. They were loud, flashy, and full of pride. The valet parking lot was filled with their expensive cars. Inside, the group sat at a long table, ordering bottles of wine and appetizers before Marcus even arrived. I can't wait to see his face when he looks at the menu prices, one of them joked. Poor guy probably eats fast food every day, another added. They laughed cruelly, their voices echoing across the dining hall. They were so sure of themselves, so certain that Marcus would walk in embarrassed, quiet, and out of place. Just as they raised their glasses in a toast, the restaurant door opened. Marcus stepped inside, his posture calm, his step steady. He didn't need flashy clothes or a loud entrance. There was something different about him now, an aura of quiet strength that none of them noticed yet. He spotted the table where his old classmates sat, and with a polite smile, he walked toward them. The laughter at the table grew quieter as he approached. For a brief moment, some of them felt a strange unease, though they didn't know why. To them, this was still the same Marcus from years ago, a single dad who, in their minds, had gone nowhere. What they didn't realize was that the real story was just about to begin. Marcus walked calmly toward the table where his old classmates were seated. The noise of laughter and chatter filled the restaurant, but when they noticed him, their eyes narrowed with curiosity. Some wore forced smiles, others exchanged glances as if they were preparing themselves to play the game they had planned. To them, this was a performance, and Marcus was their target. Marcus! Look who finally showed up, Brian said loudly, waving his hand in the air. His tone was friendly on the surface, but his smirk revealed something else. The others chuckled and greeted Marcus as though they were truly glad to see him, yet their eyes carried a mix of arrogance and hidden amusement. Marcus smiled politely, shook a few hands, and took the seat at the far end of the table. He did not dress to impress, but his posture carried quiet strength. The classmates leaned forward, eager to begin their subtle mockery. So, Marcus, Claire began as she adjusted her diamond bracelet in the candlelight, what have you been up to? Still busy, babysitting. She said the last word slowly, her eyebrows raised, and the table erupted in laughter. Marcus simply nodded. I've been busy with my daughter, yes. She's growing fast. Time flies. His calmness seemed to annoy them. They wanted him to feel embarrassed, but he showed no sign of discomfort. Another classmate, James, jumped in. Man, it must be tough. Raising a kid alone? How do you even afford it? Do you still live in that tiny apartment we all joked about? He laughed again, and the others followed, enjoying the cruelty of their own words. Marcus folded his hands on the table, his expression unshaken. Life has its challenges, but you learn to adapt. You do what you have to do for the people you love. His words carried honesty, and for a second, some at the table felt a pinch of guilt. But the mood quickly returned to arrogance as Brian leaned forward again. Well, you're stronger than I'd ever be. I can't imagine living without luxury. I mean, look at this place. He gestured around the restaurant with pride. This is the life we deserve after all those years of hard work. Expensive food, expensive drinks, expensive everything. Marcus looked at the golden chandeliers, the waiters in crisp uniforms, and the tables lined with crystal glasses. He could see how much they believed luxury defined them. He didn't argue, he simply smiled and let them talk. The waiter arrived with menus, and everyone ordered the most expensive items. Claire ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She glanced at Marcus and tilted her head. "Marcus, are you sure you're okay with this place? The menu isn't exactly affordable." The table giggled. Someone whispered, "Maybe we should start a fundraiser." Marcus nodded calmly. "I'll be fine." The food arrived in courses: salads with exotic greens, soups with ingredients flown in from across the world, steaks cooked to perfection. His classmates cheered as they clinked glasses and took photos for their social media, making sure everyone would see their wealth. Marcus, however, quietly ate without drawing attention. As the evening continued, the mockery grew sharper. "So, Marcus," James asked, "what do you do now? Don't tell me you're still working at those part-time jobs. You must be, what, a cashier somewhere? Or maybe delivering packages?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. Marcus put down his fork slowly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the table and met their eyes one by one. "I work for myself," he said softly. They laughed. "For yourself? Like selling things online?" Claire teased. Marcus only gave a faint smile. "Something like that." He didn't feel the need to give details. He had nothing to prove. The classmates leaned back in their chairs, feeling satisfied that they had successfully cornered him. To them, Marcus still looked like the quiet, struggling single dad from the past. They had no idea of the truth. The night dragged on, filled with more expensive orders, louder laughter, and endless bragging. They compared houses, cars, and vacations. One boasted about his yacht, another about his villa in Europe. Every story was bigger than the last, and every word was a competition. Marcus sat quietly, listening, offering a polite smile when needed. Inside, however, he felt a mix of sadness and amusement. These were the same people who once ignored him, who once looked down on him, and now, years later, they hadn't changed. Their lives were built on the illusion of wealth and pride, while his life was built on sacrifice, patience, and love for his daughter. He wondered how long it would take before they realized that real success isn't loud, it's steady, and it speaks for itself. Toward the end of the evening, the waiter came by to ask if they wanted dessert. The classmates insisted on ordering the finest chocolate soufflés, cheesecakes, and fruit platters. Claire raised her glass and said, "This is how you celebrate success. Look at us now on top of the world." Marcus sipped his water and glanced at his watch. He wasn't in a rush, but he knew the evening was reaching the point where everything would change. His classmates had mocked him enough. Soon, without even realizing it, they would see the truth for themselves. When the bill finally arrived, it was enormous. The table erupted into laughter and jokes about how much money they had just spent. Someone suggested splitting it equally. Brian turned to Marcus with a mischievous grin. "Hope this isn't too much for you, buddy." The others laughed, waiting for Marcus to panic, waiting to see him fumble or make excuses. But Marcus remained calm, his voice steady as he spoke. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "I'll take care of it." For a moment, they froze. Then the laughter returned, louder than before. "Marcus, you're too funny!" James exclaimed. "You pay this bill? That's rich." But Marcus didn't laugh. He simply looked at the waiter and nodded. "Put it all on my account." The table went silent. The waiter didn't question Marcus. Instead, he bowed slightly and said, "Of course, Mr. Carter." His voice carried respect, and in that instant, the classmates felt a sudden, strange unease. They didn't understand what was happening, but they were about to find out. Marcus sat back in his chair as the weight of his words settled over the table. The laughter that had filled the restaurant just seconds ago faded into an uneasy silence. His classmates looked at one another, expecting him to laugh along, to reveal it was just a joke. But Marcus's calm expression didn't change. He wasn't playing games. The waiter had spoken to him with respect, and that respect was not something money could buy. It came from recognition. Claire tried to recover first. She forced a smile and said, "Oh come on, Marcus, you don't really mean that. This bill is, well, let's just say it's a little out of your league." She chuckled nervously, glancing at the others for support. The waiter returned, bowing politely as he handed Marcus the receipt folder. "Everything has been taken care of, Mr. Carter. As always, it is a pleasure to serve you here." His voice was steady and professional, but his words carried weight. "As always," Brian repeated, his voice cracking slightly. He turned to Marcus, his confidence fading. "Wait a second, what does he mean by that?" Marcus opened the folder, glanced at the bill, and signed it without blinking. He slid the folder back to the waiter with a nod. The waiter gave another respectful bow and walked away, leaving the classmates staring at Marcus in disbelief. For a long moment, no one spoke. They just sat there, staring at the man they thought they knew, the man they thought was beneath them. James finally broke the silence. "Marcus, what's going on? Since when can you pay for dinners like this?" Marcus looked around the table, his eyes calm but piercing. "You've all made a lot of assumptions about me tonight. You've laughed, mocked, and judged, just like you did years ago. But you never stopped to wonder what I've been doing with my life. You thought being a single father meant weakness. You thought simplicity meant failure. You couldn't be more wrong." His words cut through the air like glass shattering. The group shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Claire leaned forward, her curiosity stronger than her pride. "Then tell us, Marcus. What exactly have you been doing all these years? Because clearly, we've missed something." Marcus didn't brag. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he spoke with quiet strength. "After graduation, I started a small tech company. I worked long hours, often with my daughter sitting next to me while I coded, emailed clients, and built systems from scratch. I made mistakes, but I learned from them. Slowly, I grew that company. We expanded into software, then into international markets. Today, that company is valued at over $100 million. We employ hundreds of people. And more importantly, it gave me the ability to provide a stable, happy life for my daughter." Gasps rippled around the table. Brian's mouth fell open. James rubbed his forehead as if trying to make sense of what he had just heard. Claire sat frozen, her hands clasped tightly around her wine glass. "You," Brian finally managed to say. "You built $100 million company? That's impossible. You were just," his words trailed off, and he couldn't finish the sentence. "Just what?" Marcus asked, his voice low but steady. "Just a black single father? Just a man without fancy clothes or a rich family to support him? That's what you all thought, isn't it? You defined me by your shallow measures of success. But while you were busy showing off, I was building. While you were laughing, I was sacrificing. And while you were mocking me, I was focused on something greater than myself." The classmates sat in silence, their arrogance now crumbling. Every memory they had of Marcus the quiet student, the young father rushing out of class, the man they dismissed as ordinary was replaced by the reality in front of them. The restaurant manager suddenly appeared at the table, smiling warmly at Marcus. "Mr. Carter, thank you again for your continued support. We are honored to have you dine with us tonight." He nodded respectfully to Marcus before leaving. This time, the classmates couldn't hide their shock. Claire whispered under her breath, "He's not just a customer here, he's an investor." Marcus didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. His silence was answer enough. James leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "I can't believe this. All this time, we thought you were nothing. And here you are, sitting in front of us, more successful than all of us combined." Marcus's eyes softened for a moment. "It was never about proving anything to you. My daughter is the reason I work so hard. She's the reason I never gave up. She deserved a better life, and I was determined to give it to her. That's what real success is, providing for the people you love, not showing off for the people you don't." The words struck them like a mirror being held up to their faces. They saw their own emptiness, the endless chasing of material things, the need to brag and belittle others just to feel powerful. Suddenly, all their expensive clothes, cars, and vacations felt meaningless. Claire cleared her throat, her voice softer now. "Marcus, I think we owe you an apology. We invited you here tonight for the wrong reasons. We wanted to mock you, to make ourselves feel superior. But we were blind. I'm sorry." Others nodded reluctantly, some lowering their eyes in shame. Marcus gave a small smile, but it wasn't one of satisfaction or revenge. It was a smile of peace. "I don't need apologies. What I need is for you to learn something from this. Respect shouldn't be given based on appearances, money, or status. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you don't see. Remember that before you judge someone again." The table went quiet again. No one dared to laugh now. No one had the courage to mock him anymore. For the rest of the night, Marcus carried himself with the same calm dignity he had shown from the beginning. His classmates, however, were left humbled, their pride shattered. They realized they had wasted years chasing an image while the man they once mocked had built something real, something lasting. When Marcus finally stood to leave, the others remained seated, still processing the truth. He gave them a polite nod, thanked them for the evening, and walked out of the restaurant. His steps were steady, his head held high. Outside, his car waited, a simple but elegant luxury sedan, nothing flashy but powerful in its quiet way, just like him. As he drove home to his daughter, Marcus felt no anger toward his classmates. Instead, he felt gratitude. Their doubt and mockery had once fueled his determination. And now, their shock was a reminder of how far he had come. Inside the restaurant, however, his classmates sat in silence, their glasses untouched, their laughter gone. The lesson Marcus left behind echoed in their minds, and they knew they would never forget it. Marcus walked out of the restaurant with calm steps, leaving behind a silence that none of his classmates had expected. But inside, the weight of what had just happened still lingered. The classmates sat stiff in their chairs, each one lost in thought, their pride crumbling like a fragile mask. They had come to mock, to belittle, to feel powerful at Marcus's expense. Instead, they had been the ones exposed. The table that had been full of laughter and loud voices now felt heavy. Brian broke the silence first, his voice low and uneasy. "I can't believe it. Marcus, of all people. He owns a company worth $100 million? That doesn't even sound real." Claire pressed her fingers against her forehead, shaking her head slowly. "It's real. You saw how the manager treated him. That wasn't fake. And the way the waiter said, as always, he's a regular here. Not just a customer, maybe more. We've been blind this whole time." James leaned back, staring at the ceiling as though trying to escape the truth. "All these years, I thought he was just some guy struggling to raise a kid. We laughed at him. We made jokes about his life. And meanwhile, he was building an empire. An empire, while we were wasting time trying to show off." No one responded right away. Each of them was caught between shock and shame. The memory of Marcus's quiet words echoed in their heads, respect shouldn't be given based on appearances, money, or status. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you don't see. For the first time, they felt small not because Marcus had made them feel that way, but because their own arrogance had stripped them of dignity. Meanwhile, Marcus was already driving home. The night air was cool, and the streets were quieter now. His car glided smoothly under the streetlights, but his mind was calm, not triumphant. He wasn't thinking about the look of shock on his classmates' faces or the power of his reveal. He was thinking about his daughter, Alana. She was the reason for everything. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, she had been the anchor that kept him moving forward. He pulled into his driveway, a modest but elegant home that reflected his values: quiet success, not loud luxury. Inside, the lights in the living room were still on. Alana was sitting on the couch with a book in her hands, waiting for him. "You're back," she said with a smile. "How was it?" Marcus smiled, setting his keys on the table. "It was interesting. Let's just say your dad surprised a few people tonight." Alana tilted her head curiously. "Surprised them how?" Marcus chuckled softly. "They thought I was still the same man they judged years ago. They didn't know the truth. And tonight, they found out." Alana's smile widened, but her eyes carried a softness filled with pride. "I knew you'd show them. Not because you wanted to prove something, but because you've always been more than what they thought. You didn't need their approval." Marcus sat beside her and pulled her into a gentle hug. "That's right. I didn't need it. All I ever needed was to know you were safe, happy, and cared for. That's what mattered. The rest doesn't mean anything." Back at the restaurant, the evening continued, though the energy had changed completely. The expensive food on their plates tasted bland now, and the wine had lost its flavor. They pushed their forks around, struggling to make conversation. Brian finally sighed. "Do you realize what this means? Marcus is wealthier than all of us combined. And he didn't even show off. He just existed, and it humbled us all. I feel foolish." Claire stared at her untouched dessert. "We mocked him for being a single dad, as if that was a weakness. But he turned it into his strength. He said his daughter was the reason he worked so hard. That's powerful." James, who had always been one of the loudest and most arrogant in the group, looked down at his hands. "We invited him here to laugh at him. Instead, we ended up looking like clowns. He didn't even need to insult us. Just his truth was enough." The table fell quiet again. The weight of regret was heavy, and none of them knew how to lift it. The next day, word spread quickly among their circle of friends. Stories of Marcus's quiet reveal at the restaurant traveled like wildfire. Those who weren't there couldn't believe it. "Marcus Carter? The quiet guy? The one we used to laugh at? He's worth $100 million. The disbelief only made the story grow stronger. For Marcus, though, life went on the same way it always had. He woke up early, made breakfast for Alana, and prepared for a busy day of work. His office wasn't in a flashy skyscraper, but in a building that buzzed with the energy of hundreds of employees who believed in his vision. He walked through the hallways, greeted by people who respected him not because of his money, but because of his leadership and integrity. In private moments, Marcus often thought about the journey. There had been nights when he nearly gave up, when bills piled higher than his courage, when exhaustion pressed down so hard he thought he couldn't move. But every time, Alana's laughter, her small hand holding his, gave him the strength to rise again. That was the story his classmates would never understand. Success wasn't born out of luxury, it was born out of love and sacrifice. Meanwhile, his classmates struggled with what they had learned. Their social media posts about vacations and cars felt hollow now. When they looked in the mirror, they no longer saw confidence, they saw insecurity, hidden behind layers of luxury. They had defined themselves by their possessions, while Marcus had defined himself by his purpose. Brian tried to joke about it later, telling others, "Well, at least we had a fun dinner." But deep down, the memory of Marcus's calm smile haunted him. Claire found herself replaying Marcus's words in her head whenever she felt the urge to show off. James, the loudest of all, stayed strangely quiet for weeks, humbled in a way that nothing else in his life had ever managed to do. As for Marcus, he never bragged about what happened. He didn't tell the story to his employees or post about it online. For him, the real victory wasn't showing his classmates who he had become, it was knowing that he had stayed true to himself, and that he had built a life of dignity, love, and strength without needing anyone's approval. When he sat with Alana at night, helping her with homework or watching movies together, he knew he had already won the only battle that mattered. His daughter looked at him not as a man who was worth millions, but as a father who had given her the world. And in the quiet of those moments, Marcus felt richer than ever. Marcus's reveal at the dinner had ended quietly, but its echo carried loudly in the lives of his old classmates. Each of them had walked away that night feeling a sting of shame they could not easily hide. For years they had measured their worth in expensive cars, designer clothes, and loud boasting. And yet, one quiet man, the same man they once mocked, had shown them what true success looked like without raising his voice. For Marcus, life returned to its normal rhythm. The next morning, he woke up early, as he always did, to make breakfast for Alana. The smell of scrambled eggs and toast filled the kitchen as the sunlight streamed through the window. Alana walked in, still in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. She smiled when she saw her dad busy at the stove. "You're up early," she teased softly. Marcus chuckled. "Old habits. I wanted to make sure you start your day right." They sat together at the table, father and daughter, sharing a simple meal. To Marcus, these moments were more precious than any million-dollar deal. He looked at his daughter and thought about the road he had walked to reach this point. The struggles, the sacrifices, the long nights, all of it had been worth it. Meanwhile, the classmates who had once mocked him found themselves wrestling with guilt. Brian, who had laughed the loudest at dinner, kept replaying the night in his mind. He remembered Marcus's calm voice, his quiet dignity, and the way the restaurant staff treated him with genuine respect. For the first time, Brian realized that wealth wasn't about showing off. It was about character. Claire, too, felt unsettled. She had always taken pride in her jewelry, her vacations, and her high society friends. But after Marcus's words, she noticed how hollow those things felt. When she posted a photo of her new handbag online, she found herself asking, "Does this really matter?" The answer, uncomfortably, was no. James struggled the most. He had mocked Marcus with cruel words, asking if he still lived in a tiny apartment or worked part-time jobs. Now, those words haunted him. He realized he had been the fool, blind to the strength and determination of someone who had quietly built something far greater than his own life. He thought about calling Marcus to apologize, but pride held him back. Marcus, on the other hand, carried no bitterness. That evening at the restaurant had not been about revenge. It had been about truth. He didn't need their apologies or their friendship. He only hoped they had learned something. A week later, Marcus attended a charity event hosted by one of the organizations his company supported. He believed in giving back, in using his success to help others. As he stood among community leaders and families whose lives had been touched by his contributions, he felt a sense of fulfillment that no luxury car or mansion could bring. People approached him with gratitude, thanking him for scholarships, food programs, and technology centers his foundation had funded. Alana stood by his side, proud of her father. She whispered to him, "This is what really matters, isn't it?" Marcus smiled warmly. "Yes, sweetheart. Helping others. Building something that lasts. That's the true measure of wealth." That same night, two of his former classmates happened to be at the same charity gala. Claire and Brian spotted Marcus across the room, speaking humbly with families who had benefited from his donations. They watched in silence, realizing just how different he was from the image they once held in their minds. He wasn't just wealthy, he was respected, admired, and loved. Brian finally walked over, nervous but determined. "Marcus," he said quietly, "I just want to say, I was wrong. We were all wrong. We treated you badly, and you still showed us more grace than we deserved. I'm sorry." Marcus looked at him, his expression calm. He nodded slowly. "I accept your words. Just remember, what you say and how you treat people leaves marks. Choose kindness next time. It costs nothing but means everything." Brian nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He knew Marcus was right. Claire stepped forward next, her eyes softer than before. "I used to think success was about showing off. But after that night, and seeing you here, I know better. Thank you for opening my eyes, even if it hurt." Marcus didn't gloat. He simply said, "I hope you live differently from now on." Later that evening, as Marcus drove Alana home, she sat quietly in the passenger seat, deep in thought. After a while, she spoke. "Dad, do you ever regret how hard it was? Raising me alone, working so much, being judged by people." Marcus glanced at her, his eyes warm. "Never. Every hard moment shaped me. And every sacrifice was worth it because of you. If people judged me, that was their problem. What matters is how you see yourself, not how others see you." Alana leaned back in her seat, her heart full. She knew her father's journey wasn't just about business or money, it was about love, dignity, and resilience. As time passed, Marcus's story spread beyond his circle of classmates. He became known in the community not just as a successful businessman, but as a man of principle. People admired him for his humility, for raising his daughter with love, and for building his empire without forgetting where he came from. His classmates never forgot that night at the restaurant. It stayed with them as a lesson etched deep in their hearts. They learned that arrogance only leads to regret, and that respect must be given freely, without judgment. Years later, when his daughter graduated and gave a speech about her father's sacrifices, Marcus sat in the audience with tears in his eyes. She spoke not of his wealth, but of his heart. "My father showed me that true success isn't about money or status. It's about love, integrity, and never giving up, no matter how hard life gets." The audience stood and applauded, but Marcus only smiled, his heart full. He knew he had already won the greatest prize of all, the love and respect of his daughter. And as for the classmates who once mocked him, they carried their regret quietly. Some changed, becoming humbler and kinder. Others struggled with pride but never forgot the lesson Marcus had unknowingly taught them. The truth was simple: arrogance fades, but dignity lasts forever. Marcus never needed to boast about being worth 100 million. His life spoke louder than words. His journey stood as proof that strength, humility, and love could turn even the hardest struggles into the greatest victories. And in the end, his classmates would always remember the night they invited Marcus to mock him, only to discover that he was the richest man in the room, not just in wealth, but in spirit.